Breaking news from China. Strong earthquakes have hit two different regions in the southwestern province of Yunnan and the Qinghai province in the northeast. In Yunnan province, at least 3 people were killed and dozens injured near the popular tourist destination of Dali.
The ground is now shaken in the same small county at least half a dozen times in under 2 weeks, and each time it's coming from almost exactly the same coordinates. This is Geoxian County in Yibin City, Sichuan province, and while the earthquakes here haven't reached the scale of China's most catastrophic historical disasters, the pattern behind them is exactly the kind of thing that makes seismologists sit up and pay very close attention. Here's the timeline of what's actually happened, confirmed by China's own earthquake monitoring authorities. It started on June 29th, when a magnitude 5.8 earthquake struck Geoxian County, with its epicenter recorded at a depth of just 6 kilometers, remarkably shallow. Then, on the morning of July 8th, the same county was hit again, twice. According to the China Earthquake Network Center, a cluster of 8 separate earthquakes struck Geoxian between roughly 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. that day, the strongest measuring magnitude 5.0. Hours later, at 10:08 a.m., another magnitude 5.0 earthquake jolted the exact same area. Its epicenter sat within just 2 to 3 kilometers of the earlier quake that same morning, meaning this wasn't a scattered series of unrelated tremors across the region. This was the same small patch of ground shaking again and again within hours, and it didn't stop there. The next day, July 9th, a magnitude 4.8 earthquake struck Geoxian yet again, at almost the identical coordinates as the quakes before it. Every single one of these events registered at a shallow depth of around 6 kilometers. That shallow depth is a critical detail, and it's exactly why the damage from these quakes has been more severe than the raw magnitude numbers alone might suggest. When an earthquake occurs close to the surface, the energy it releases has far less rock to travel through before it reaches the buildings, roads, and infrastructure sitting on top. That means a shallow magnitude 5. Earthquake can hit a community harder than a much larger earthquake occurring deep underground, and that's exactly what residents in Geoxian and the surrounding area described. Tremors were felt strongly enough to send furniture moving inside homes, trigger warning systems, and send people rushing out of buildings. Shaking was reportedly felt as far away as Chengdu, the provincial capital, hundreds of kilometers to the north. Officials confirmed real damage on the ground. 4 people suffered minor injuries. Over 4,000 houses were damaged across the affected area. Roads cracked. Rockfalls were reported in surrounding hillsides. Public facilities, including schools, suffered visible cracking. In response, China's Earthquake Administration activated a Level 3 emergency response, and local authorities in Sichuan dispatched 28 rescue teams, totaling 854 personnel and 153 vehicles, into the affected zone. Temporary resettlement sites have since been set up in villages like Kunle, where displaced residents are being provided meals and shelter while their homes are inspected for structural safety. So what's actually happening underground here? According to Sichuan earthquake experts, this sequence is linked to a regional fault zone running through the area, and officials note that southern Sichuan sits on ground that is anything but geologically simple. The region contains numerous overlapping fault structures, layers of rock that have been folded, compressed, and fractured by older, pre-existing faults over a very long geological history. And when stress shifts in a region built on that kind of foundation, these older fault lines can reactivate, which is one explanation for why the same county, the same fault area, and the same shallow depth keep showing up quake after quake. This isn't unfamiliar territory either. Sichuan has a documented history of significant seismic activity, including a magnitude 6.6 level earthquake event in Luding in 2022 that was the region's largest since 2017 and claimed dozens of lives. Southern Sichuan, in other words, is not an area with no earthquake history suddenly acting strangely. It's a known active seismic zone that just produced an unusually tight, repeated cluster of moderate quakes in a very short window. Now, it's worth being upfront about something. Southern Sichuan is also home to extensive underground industrial activity, shale gas development, salt extraction, older mining operations, reservoirs, and a significant network of tunnels. Because of that, some residents and online commentators have raised questions about whether human activity underground could have played any role in triggering this specific sequence. That's a fair question to ask in a region with this kind of industrial footprint, and it's one that would require real scientific investigation to answer properly. Things like detailed fault plane analysis, reservoir level records, fluid injection history, and whether earthquake locations shift in any pattern relative to industrial sites nearby. As of right now, no official body has confirmed any link between industrial activity in this earthquake sequence and a moderate magnitude 5 earthquake is not something typically produced by routine construction or extraction work alone. It generally requires an existing fault that was already under significant stress. So while the question itself isn't unreasonable, given the region's geology and its industrial development, there's currently no confirmed evidence connecting this sequence to anything other than natural fault activity along a known, previously studied seismic zone. What makes this moment genuinely tense, though, is the timing. This earthquake sequence isn't happening in isolation. It's unfolding in the same country during the same stretch of days as 2 major typhoons have already devastated other regions. Typhoon Maysak tore through Guangxi, breaching reservoirs and displacing hundreds of thousands of people. Typhoon Bavi followed just over a week later, forcing evacuations of nearly 2 million people across Zhejiang before pushing flooding into Hebei, Liaoning, and Jilin. And now, hundreds of kilometers away in Sichuan, the ground itself has been cracking open in a tightly clustered earthquake sequence. None of these events are officially connected to one another, but when you're a resident in Sichuan, watching your house crack from an earthquake, while the national news cycle is simultaneously covering catastrophic flooding, dam breaches, and mass evacuations elsewhere in the country, the psychological weight of what else is coming is very real, even if the disasters themselves are geologically unrelated. And there's a specific compounding danger that officials in the region are watching closely right now: rain. Southern Sichuan's terrain is steep, defined by river valleys, mountain roads, and slopes that have already been loosened and cracked by this earthquake sequence. A slope or a structure weakened by one earthquake is measurably more vulnerable during the next aftershock. And if heavy rainfall reaches those already damaged slopes, whether from a lingering system tied to this summer's typhoon activity or an unrelated storm, the risk of landslides increases sharply. Cracked roads, loosened rock, and saturated ground are exactly the ingredients that turn a moderate earthquake aftermath into a much more dangerous secondary disaster. Right now, local authorities are continuing to inspect public buildings, particularly schools, for structural safety, and are watching slopes for signs of instability as aftershocks continue in the region. Nobody is currently forecasting another major earthquake in Gyeongsang, but seismologists studying clustered sequences like this one generally treat every aftershock as a reminder that the underlying fault system is still active and still capable of producing further shaking. Whether this sequence has fully run its course or whether Gyeongsang sees another jolt in the coming days is something that genuinely cannot be predicted with certainty this early. Officials have not released a final damage assessment for the region, and given how many separate disasters are currently playing out across different parts of the country, it may take time before Sichuan gets the full, dedicated attention its earthquake recovery effort deserves on a national level. What is confirmed right now is a real, documented earthquake sequence, at least 6 significant quakes in under 2 weeks, concentrated in the same small area, over 4,000 damaged homes, minor injuries, and a full emergency response already underway. This story is still developing, and it's one I'll be watching closely alongside everything else unfolding across China right now. If you want to stay ahead of this, whether Gyeongsang sees further aftershocks, what officials eventually determine about the fault system beneath it, and how this earthquake recovery unfolds alongside the country's ongoing flood. Emergencies, make sure you're subscribed because I'll be covering every update the moment new information comes through. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Gyeongsang County, Yibin City, Sichuan. It started June 29th with a magnitude 5.5 quake at just 6 kilometers depth, remarkably shallow. Then, on July 8th, a cluster of 8 quakes struck between 4 and 6 a.m., the strongest, a magnitude 5.0. Hours later, another 5.0 hit within 2 to 3 kilometers of that morning's quake. The next day, a 4.8 struck the same coordinates again. Every one of them is shallow, around 6 kilometers deep. That shallow depth explains the damage. Less rock between the fault and the surface means more force reaching homes and roads directly. Tremors were felt as far as Chengdu. 4 people suffered minor injuries. Over 4,000 houses were damaged. Roads cracked, rockfalls hit surrounding hillsides, and schools showed structural cracking. China's Earthquake Administration activated a Level 3 emergency response, deploying 28 rescue teams, 854 personnel, and 153 vehicles. Temporary resettlement sites are now housing displaced residents in villages like Kunli. Experts point to a known regional fault zone, one of many overlapping fault structures in southern Sichuan's folded, compressed geology. This isn't unfamiliar territory. The region saw a damaging magnitude 6+ quake near Luting in 2022. Some residents have raised questions about the area's extensive underground industrial activity, shale gas, mining, tunnels, but no official body has confirmed any link, and moderate quakes like these typically require a fault already under natural stress. What makes this tense is timing. This is unfolding while Typhoon Maysak and Typhoon Bavi have already devastated other regions with flooding and evacuations. And now rain poses a compounding risk here too, since slopes cracked by these quakes become far more landslide prone if heavy rainfall follows. No further major quakes are currently forecast, but aftershocks continue, and officials are still inspecting buildings and slopes for stability. Stay subscribed, because I'll be covering every update the moment new information comes through. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.